This morning we're following is we have now heard the proposal from Governor Ron DeSantis when it comes to what he wants to see with property taxes. He today signing a proclamation for a special session to bring lawmakers to Tallahassee to convene over this very issue to put an amendment on the ballot for voters in November. His proposal, let me see, I've got a graphic here that shows you a little bit of kind of how it would phase in. It would be an initial $250,000 homestead exemption with a plan to increase that at some point to $500,000. He said that it would be up to lawmakers to create that schedule. There would be some requirements for local governments on what they can use revenue for, the incoming property tax revenue for, limiting that to core services. New residents would not be immediately eligible for the new expanded homestead exemption. They would have to qualify for that. And the governor also proposed a state trust fund that would be able to support local governments, specifically in rural areas where they may not have as much non-homestead properties that might need some help paying for core services. So that is the proposal from the governor, something that we've been waiting months for, releasing that today. And so we are working to get some reaction from our lawmakers here who will have a chance to discuss this, debate this, and vote on this in that upcoming special session. And so we are pleased to be joined this morning by State Representative Anna Eskamani, Democrat from Orlando, who is joining us live now via Zoom. Representative Eskamani, we appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this breaking news. And so I'm grateful for a chance to unpack it. I will say we haven't seen the official proposal or language yet, so there's still a lot of unknowns, but happy to provide whatever insights I can.
So this is something, I know you are on this House Select Committee that's been looking at this issue, held a number of hearings and meetings on this, have been looking into this. Based on what we heard of the governor's proposal that he outlined at this news conference, what are your initial takeaways and your initial reaction to what we heard from the governor just a little bit ago?
Well, one of the biggest flags that we all need to acknowledge is that it doesn't provide any protection for public education. And perhaps the language will speak to that, but I did not hear any points made during his press conference this morning that public schools would be safe from these types of revenue adjusters. Ultimately, what the governor is proposing would be devastating to public education and devastating to local governments. The notion of only being able to fund, quote, core services is very unclear. I think we can all find consensus that police and fire, which are the two largest expenses of local government, are core. But how about public libraries, public parks, recreational activities, after school programs? I think for many of us, what is defined as core can vary per local government, and a blanket approach to treat every local government the same while giving a trust fund for the rural, more conservative counties definitely feels like a recipe for disaster when it comes to meeting the needs of our very diverse communities and municipalities.
I want to get your reaction on what the governor called kind of the bottoms-up approach here, where it would start as a $250,000 exemption that he said would apply to about 60% of Florida homestead owners, and kind of with the goal of expanding that to 500,000 at some point. Your thoughts on that approach to this kind of this phased approach?
Well, we have to remember that it's going to impact local governments differently based on their property value. So again, for a community like Orlando or Orange County, where we have large commercial actors that can diversify some of the revenue streams, for communities like Lake Mary, Castleberry, that's just not the case. And so it might be a phase for some larger municipalities, but not for the smaller municipalities. For small municipalities, it would be an overnight shift. And ultimately, that becomes the reality. This is not necessarily a tax break. It really becomes a tax shift where responsibility will shift to renters who are not homeowners. It'll shift to businesses, and it will bankrupt local governments. Again, the cost of these expenses for basic government services and infrastructure has gone up. So what the governor continuously fails to mention is, yes, there has been an increase in revenue from property taxes, primarily because new people are moving into Florida, so the revenue is increasing. But what he fails to always acknowledge is that the costs have also gone up. The cost to purchase a new fire truck has gone up. The cost of training and retaining staff have gone up. The cost of living has gone up, and that impacts what a local government has to pay for essential workers. And it's just the reality of the equation that he continues to ignore. Now, candidly, families do need relief. That relief could also take shape in property insurance reform. It can take shape in accountability with corporate monopolies. But instead of going after the actual realities of who is increasing costs, he continues to target local governments that are doing the best they can under very difficult circumstances. And I have no doubt there's always opportunities for efficiency, but he's asking local governments to cut their budgets in the millions. And for many local governments, they've already done that. They're already operating on the margins. And it's to be important to note that his proposal, based on what he shared this morning, doesn't just have the increase on exemption, but it also ties the hands of local governments and centralizes power in Tallahassee. And that should be concerning for everyone, regardless of political persuasion. You want to have a local government that is responsive, that is close to its people. And when you centralize everything in the state capital, you are going to get poor results.
We've heard your concerns about this based on what we heard this morning. And again, we'll start to see kind of the actual language of this. Is there anything in this proposal that you like, that you think works, that you think would be effective? Or do you think this is just a flawed concept to begin with?
Well, I think the consensus around helping those, especially on a fixed income, have relief is critical. And there have been some proposals that we debated as lawmakers around, for example, Florida residents over the age of 65 being able to get an exemption from their property taxes. And so I do think the notion that we have to provide relief and we have to do it in a way that is for the 2026 ballot, I think you have consensus on that. But what he's doing is not need-based per se. I mean, it's going to actually create more costs for families who need the most support, especially in the context of public education, the context of essential services like libraries, after-school programs. These are safety nets, and again, what I would argue are core components of local government that will be the first to get cut. Animal welfare. If you care about animal welfare and animal shelters, those are programs that are going to get cut. And so we really have to be realistic about what this proposal means long term for local governments. And I think the reality is that a lot of families that might see this and think, oh, yes, I want a reduction in my property taxes, it's not necessarily going to create a savings for you. It's just going to shift your costs to other places, and things that were once available to you as a government service will now have a fee associated to it or be privatized, where it's going to be even more expensive and lower quality.
So when when you and your colleagues convene for another special session next week, what are kind of the main things that you want to see happen? What are the main questions that you need to see answered as this process kind of begins with the new special session on Monday?
It's a great question. Ultimately, we need to understand for Florida's 67 counties and for 100 some cities what this means municipal by municipality, a better understanding of what it means for the public school system. That's the transparency that voters deserve, that if voters are going to vote on this, they have to have a clear understanding of the ultimate cost. Also, when it comes to this potential trust fund, who benefits from it and who pays for it? Is it going to be taxpayers in the larger states through sales tax that subsidize fiscally constrained counties? And why? How is that equitable? The reality is that Orange County, we already contribute $4+ billion to state coffers, and yet we don't see that revenue come back into our county to pay for the expenses that we have as a destination for tourists, as a growing community. And I'm going to be doing what I can to fight for Orange County. If this comes down to ensuring savings and equity, then we got to do our part to make sure that the counties that contribute the most to the state coffers also see the most benefit, which is not the case today. And ultimately, for me, it's going to be about the details of such a proposal and who actually benefits from relief. Is it the working class or the most wealthy of us? And how does that translate to delivering of governmental services that are essential to the health and well-being of my constituents?
State Representative, are you in special session fatigue yet?
Yes, that's a great question. It should be important to note that this is going to be special session F. And I think it does amplify a conversation about a part-time legislature and does that make sense for a state of our size? Hopefully, those will be conversations that future lawmakers can engage with. It's a reminder for our listeners that most lawmakers, myself included, do have full-time jobs in the private sector on top of our responsibilities as being lawmakers. And obviously, it can be difficult to have an employer that is as flexible as the ones required for our line of work in public service. But nonetheless, we will continue to do the work that we are sworn to uphold. But I think there is a conversation to be had about the practicality of a part-time legislature with a state with so many needs and demands.
All right, certainly another discussion, interesting points, about that. It would certainly be worthwhile, I think, to have that conversation. State Representative Anna Eskamani, Democrat from Orlando,